He's firing it up right now. Bam. 6 seconds to go. All right, let's let some folks get on here. I'll go ahead and like that right quick. But all right, Dan, we'll let some folks start piling on here, and then we'll get this bad boy. All right, I don't need that on. All right, so it's jumping up pretty good. So let's go ahead and get this started. Hey everybody, Greg Poole here at Bowjunky Media, bowjunkymedia.com. It's time for another video Q&A live here on Facebook. We will, of course, be capturing this audio and posting it as a podcast as well. Before we get started, of course, let me say that this delay
Q&A live here on Facebook. We will, of course, be capturing this audio and posting it as a podcast as well.
Is that your volume, Dan? Or are you good? All right.
Oh, no, it wasn't me.
So anyway, first of all, the reason we're a little bit late is because Big GP can't tell time because we're in Arizona, and I have been here for 5 years, and I still screw up meetings because we don't do the time zone change. So for those of you that have been hanging around here for a half hour or so waiting for us to get going, that's my fault. As much as I'd like to blame Dan, we simply can't do it. So anyway, you guys know the drill. Before we get started on this, we want to thank the folks that make this possible because, like what Dan does, like what all of us do, without the help of sponsors and advertisers, we just couldn't make this happen. And that's AAE, Kafaru International, best packs in the game. You see Aaron Snyder's out there socially distancing himself from humans but getting up close and personal with turkeys. PSE, Bomar Archery, Martin Archery, Easton, Gas Bowstrings, First Light Camo, Feather Vision Lenses, Black Rifle Coffee Company, Viking Tactics, and our friends over at Zeiss. So, all right, the response to the Q&A with Levi the other day was tremendous, and Dan, of course, is another one of those guys with a wealth of knowledge, great sense of humor, and obviously doing media and marketing stuff is Danny's favorite thing in the entire world to do. He's always one of those guys that, no, Dan? I saw that smirk. Anyway, it's Danny McCarthy, everybody. Welcome to the program, Dan.
What's up, man? How are you guys?
Oh, we're doing good, dude. We're doing good. It's a little stormy out here in Prescott Valley. The clouds are rolling in, a little bit windy, but other than that, what's new in your neck of the woods?
Nothing. I mean, we've had pretty good weather. It's been a little rainy, but the temperature is nice, so it's been great.
There you go. So obviously you have been cooped up at home a little bit longer than you were accustomed to this time of year, and so my question for you, the realistic question is, what are you doing to mitigate your OCD at this point? I see that the shop behind you is in immaculate cleanliness condition. I'm sure everything's labeled properly. You've probably pulled everything out of the bins and cleaned it. So how are things at the house?
Good. Everything's good, man. Just trying to stay inside, trying to do whatever they're telling us to do, and that's about it.
There you go. How much R&D for Black Eagle have you managed to catch up on during this delay?
Little bit.
Yeah, that's Danny avoiding a question. For those of you, for future reference, that's Danny. That's his diversion, but he's good at it. And but you know, that's just how we do. So anyway, so all right, Dan, let's talk a little bit about things right now. You said Emily's taking the dogs for a walk, and so when you in particular, you are one of the most prepared people in archery as far as the professional side goes. You always are thinking a lot ahead of the game. So kind of walk us through, at what point you got to, like, look, there's really nothing else I can prepare for. So what does Danny McCarthy transition to fill this time of the year?
No, I mean, I don't think anything in particular. It's just doing the same day-to-day stuff, practicing a little bit, trying to, I guess, stay positive, stay inside, read a lot, man, just same stuff I do in the off season except hunting. So,
all right. So, so I was joking around with you the other day, and so I figured I would. By the way, everybody, like and share this live feed so everybody can tune in. We're going to start taking your guys' questions here pretty quick, so go ahead and start loading those up. My wife Kathy's on the other side of the camera here. She'll be feeding those to me. Let's talk about that red bow, and the reason, I believe it was the red bow, but the reason that I want to bring that up is you and I were talking several days ago, and you were talking about getting a new bow and setting it up for this, and then setting it up for that. So kind of talk everybody through that particular Danny McCarthy process.
Yeah, so I had, I guess we got done with the first ASA, and I basically wasted 3 weeks because we had, the next tournament would have been indoor nationals. So I came home, started working on my indoor bow, which I had made some changes. I had made some changes with my draw length, or a little bit of a few things. So I wanted to make those changes into my indoor bow from Vegas. And so I made those changes, started getting ready, put a lot of time in getting ready for indoor nationals, and then boom, indoor nationals got pushed back. So I was like, gosh darn it. Well, right. I guess, all right, so what's next? So the next tournament would have been Yankton, I think. And so I really, the bow that I was shooting inside was really the bow I kind of wanted to be shooting for Yankton anyway, just because I'm kind of OCD, and I had picked my colors of what bow was going to be what. So I decided, well, I'll just tear this bow apart and set it up for Yankton with small stuff, which I had already had a bow set up with some small stuff, kind of, 80% ready or so.
Right.
And so I tore that bow back apart, started getting it ready for Yankton, got it all ready, started shooting it, and then they canceled Yankton. And I was like, gosh darn it. And then they canceled Reading. Or they canceled Reading first, and then they delayed Yankton or whatever. Right. So I was like, man, I probably won't need this bow for a while, so maybe I should set up a backup 3D bow. So then I started getting everything ready for, it's just been, I've set up a bow, tore it apart, set it up again, tore it apart, set it up again, tore it apart.
Right.
So really I just kind of wasted a bunch of weeks. But
there you go. So before we get to everybody's questions, I'm curious, when a shooter of your caliber sets up a new bow, how long generally do you feel like you need behind that bow as far as getting the fit and feel the way you want it, getting the tune the way you want it? Obviously, you've probably pre-selected your arrows, but how much time do you generally need behind a new rig before you're like, all right, this is good enough? Good enough to go practice with is one thing, good enough to go compete against Levi Morgan is another. So, or Jesse or whoever it may be. So how long does it generally take you until you're like, all right, I can go to work with this bow?
Really, it depends on it depends on how new the bow is. If it's like a brand new model and I've got no time behind it, probably a couple months, month and a half before I feel like I really have the bows figured out. I mean, I can get them shooting usually pretty well right off the bat, but there's just some little intricacies maybe of how you like it balanced, or how my loop location on the bow, or draw length adjustments, loop length adjustments, just teeny tiny changes that may take a couple months, I feel like, to get set up. But once I get a bow working and I get those things figured out, then I think it's a lot faster. And generally, like if I was to go with a new 36 right now, and I'm pretty familiar with the bow, I've had some success with it and know kind of how I like it set up. Maybe a day and a half, 2 days to work with it.
Nice. Now, are you the kind of guy that journals everything, so you can literally pull out a book and be like, okay, peep to arrow at full draw, axle to axle, break? I mean, are you the kind of guy that journals all that stuff, or do you just basically commit it all to memory?
No, I journal it all down.
Nice.
Everything from dates to each tournament, from day to day, any changes I make, from adding weight to a stabilizer on what bow, to a twist out of my cables, a twist out of my string. Any of those changes I document, and I document at the end of the day how I felt like I rate it from like 1 to 10 of whether I think it was a good decision or a bad decision. But I usually stay with it for a little while.
There you go. All right, let's jump into these questions here, folks. All right, What do you got, babe?
Neves Gonzalez.
Neves Gonzalez.
As a beginner, how do you start judging distance?
So basically, for a beginner, Dan, how would you suggest starting to learn how to judge distance?
All right, so I think everybody's different. I don't think how you judge is necessarily as important to how well you stick to how you judge. Like, I think you have to figure out how you're going to do it, and then you have to like stay the course, and that way you actually can get better at that. I think a lot of people change their strategies. Some people judge the ground. They'll judge 10-yard increments. They'll do that for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and it doesn't work. And then they decide, you know what, I'm going to find my 30 instead, and then I'm going to go from there. And that doesn't work. They give it 2 weeks, and then they try to judge off of just the body size. And they don't really stick with something. So I think however you judge, however you're going to do it, judge like that all the time for a long time and try to give yourself some time to phase into it. And do it with conviction. Like, I think a lot of people, like I said, are always fishing for that change that they could make that's going to make them better, instead of just staying the course and being patient for a long time and allowing themselves to like really hone that skill set or that technique a little better.
So if someone was to come up to you and literally be like, I've never shot 3D before, I can't buy all the targets, but I am going to start to judge yardage, what would you tell them? What would be the first technique? Would it be to perfect finding 20, or what would be your number one recommendation for a technique to judge for somebody new?
So I think depending on the class and depending on the maximum distance that you're going to shoot, or what your average distance might be that you're going to compete at, try to find a mark somewhere in there to find instead of your 20. Maybe find your 30. If it's a farther, something like our professional courses, maybe find a 40 or something like that, and get really as efficient as you can at judging that distance, and then go from there. So. If you get really good at finding your 40, try to go maybe, judge off of that. Like, there's my 40, and I think it's 6 yards further than that, or 10 yards closer, et cetera, et cetera.
Perfect. All right, babe, what do you got?
Colin Michael.
Do
you prefer a short or long D-loop when shooting a back tension?
So when shooting a back tension, which I'm sure we will be getting into some of your release choices here on this live feed, but basically they ask, what's your preferred loop length when shooting a hinge?
So I guess it depends on the bow. The more obtuse that string angle is going to be, basically the longer axle to axle that I'm shooting, the longer the loop length's probably going to be. And then in contrast, the shorter the bow, the shorter the D-loop, and the longer the draw length. So the overall is going to be really similar from like the throat of my bow's handle to where my release actually clips in.
Right.
But so that distance will pretty much be the same from a short axle-to-axle bow or a long axle-to-axle bow. But the draw length, if I'm using like a long D-loop, the draw length is going to be a little shorter, and the loop is going to be a little longer. And then on a short bow, my draw length is going to be a little longer, and my D-loop is going to be a little shorter.
So the style of release, whether it's a hinge or a thumb button, doesn't necessarily affect the length of the loop you shoot.
No, I think the head of that particular release is what's going to affect that more so than anything. If I'm using a hinge that's got a really, really short head on it, then I'm probably going to shoot a longer head or a longer loop on that than if I was using a button that had a really long head.
Right. Absolutely.
So it all basically determined off of my jaw. So like if my hand's up here, I need to have enough room to come into anchor. So if I'm shooting really short head, I have to lengthen that loop out in order to be able to get into my jaw.
All right. So before we get 15 questions about it, just let me ask, what sort of loop considerations do you bring into play for the beard?
I just shave a slot from my string to come down. I usually shave it off. Right. I'll shave it off.
So I'm folks, right now I'm going to throw out an impromptu Bowjunky Media quarantine challenge to Danny McCarthy right now. Danny, I'm challenging you to not shave the beard or trim the beard until 1 week before the next event. Do you accept?
No, because I'd have to retune all my bows.
I'd have to retune. Oh, that's great. All right, babe. What do you got?
Todd Maziarz.
Todd Maziarz.
Can you go over step-by-step setting up a stabilizer system?
Okay, so Todd basically wants your ABC 1, 2, 3 on your initial setup for stabilizers.
All right, so I'm usually a little bit gun shy of helping anybody with balancing a stabilizer, just because every bow's different, every person's different, and what they prefer. Some people like their bows to be a little bit more front heavy. Others like them to be a little bit back heavy. I prefer my bow to have a little more weight on the left side than a lot of people. So what works for me doesn't usually work for everybody, and it's definitely not universal. So what I'll generally do when setting up my bow is all I'm really paying attention to is how well the bow aims. That's it. So the front to back balance of the bow is going to, there's a lot of factors that are going to come into play. It could be how much weight I'm holding is in holding weight, the length of that bar that I'm using on the front, whether it's going to be indoors or whether it's going to be outdoors, whether I'm going to be shooting at low 12s or maybe center bullseye, etc. Like a lot of that stuff's gonna maybe influence me a little bit, but I'm really paying attention to how well that bow's aiming. If I feel like I'm really struggling to hold the bow up, then two things: I don't want a lot of mass weight. I need to reduce my overall mass weight, like probably on the bow, or I need to at least reduce some of the front forward weight on the bow.
Sure.
And so I'll maybe cut a little bit of that, and then my back bar is more so I use that just to level my bow out, so that when I'm aiming the bow, my bubble sits pretty level, and I don't have to actually consciously try to level the bow. It just stays there, and I'm not very good at that, but that's what it's for.
Right. Right. And so what sort of, do you have any sort of I've always been a giant sissy. I don't know what it is. Pure strength has nothing to do with it, but I've always been like an 8.5 pound guy. If I get too much over 8.5 pounds, literally I can't hold it up. But for you, when you were setting this up, and this was not really a question from anybody, but just to follow up on that, do you generally have any sort of a mass weight window that you like to fall into historically?
No, I guess not really. I mean, the bow that I shot last year was like, I don't know. I'm all over the place. I was like, last year was like 7.9 or 8 pounds even or something like that. And then this year was like 9.3. I mean, so like I don't know what I'm doing. I try different things all the time, and I just stick with them long enough to get used to them.
There you go. Well, I can remember seeing you in Reading way back in the day when you had like a tumor of weights growing on the bottom of your riser. So, obviously the weight thing is what it is. But so you just basically go off comfort, the bow, and what seems to be working at that particular time. Do you find yourself changing mass weight from indoors to outdoors at all, or do you, if it's comfortable at one, it's good enough and you can just roll into the other?
No, sometimes I do, and I guess it depends on personal strength. Sometimes, for Vegas, for instance, if I'm shooting 3 arrows, it's easier for me to shoot 3 arrows or shoot 1 arrow for 3D and hold up a heavy bow. But then if I'm trying to shoot something like indoor nationals where I'm shooting 5 arrows at a time, that fourth or fifth shot might not be as high a quality if I'm shooting a really, really heavy bow. So I try to find that balance of, where my stamina with holding that bow up kind of equals out. And so I don't want to go crazy light if I'm used to shooting a heavy bow for 3D. I don't just want to make that change and go really, really light, because I'll probably see a lot more pin movement or a change in that pin movement. And so, but maybe reducing it a few ounces might help, that fifth arrow, or help me stay calm and keep my anxiety down and not actually be fighting fatigue on that fifth arrow.
Right. And how does your shot timing come into play here? Because can't, to be honest with you, Dan, I can't necessarily remember back 10, 15 years on how long your shots took then. I could probably dig up some old videos or whatever, but now you are most definitely an aimer. Like, wait 5 seconds when Dan comes to full draw to even pull up your binoculars type aimer. And so as your shot length gets to a certain point, how does that factor into what you were just talking about?
I think it's just the obvious factor. It's not a good thing unless you're like working on it. So I mean, it plays into the overall as far as you know how well you can hold it up from the physical side. But as far as like the mental side goes, or the anxiety side for me, like I'm really used to that. I practice holding, I practice aiming, and I don't know. I mean, part of it's a good thing, part of it's a bad thing. Like, I wish I could shoot a little faster sometimes, but I shoot such a slow, just really slow and steady, patient shot. I try to not fire my bow. I don't try to think about anything other than keeping my form and everything strong and concentrating on that. I try to never actually try to make my shot fire.
Right.
And because I do that, and I do that often, and I've been doing that for years, you know, if a shot takes a long time, and a long time for me might even be an extra 15 seconds.
Right.
I stay pretty calm even through that last couple seconds. So
right.
I don't know. I don't think it affects me the same as everybody else. Again, I'll just say, you know, look at yourself and kind of be a critic of yourself. Don't necessarily try to hold as long as me or try to fire as fast as, you know, some of the other guys like Brady Gillantine or
right.
You know, those guys
right.
get up there and send it, and
right.
half the time I'm just like I forget what I'm doing up there because I'm just like, man, these guys are so good, these guys are so fast,
right.
And I'm jealous sometimes of how fast they get up there and shoot, but you know, it doesn't work for me, and
right.
and I haven't necessarily tried to do it that fast, but I don't know. I don't think it'd be pretty.
Yeah, well,
personally.
I think what you're doing is working, so I wouldn't necessarily. Although there's probably a bunch of people in your class who would more than love to see you change up what you're doing. I think it's working out pretty well. All right, Kathy, what do you got? Aaron McGlattery. Uh-oh.
Best way to judge yardage with mega snow and no target. Everyone in SK and AV wants to know.
Aaron McGlattery wants to know what's the best way to judge targets in the snow with no 3D targets.
Get a lot of practice in August and September. Like a lot.
Find a friend who doesn't live in the snow and go visit.
Yeah. Look at a lot of pictures.
That's what pictures. Print out a bunch of pictures of what a target looks like at different distances. That's great. All right, yeah. Kathy, what do you got? Cameron Herbert.
Why the 36 over the 40?
Why the 36 over the 40? Obviously, folks talking about the TRX Matthews models.
This one's simple. 36 is my lucky number.
Straight cash money, homie. Send it.
Honestly, for me, it's the 36 is faster. Was a little bit faster than the 40. I shot the TRX 7s that are 40 inches. And I've got so much time behind them that I'm really familiar with them. So chances are probably if I was going to go with the 40 for me, just because I've got so much time behind that 40-inch model, I would maybe consider that one. But really, when I started shooting the 36, I actually really liked it. I liked the increased speed. I liked the string angle a lot. And for my shorter draw length, that 36 just felt so much more comfortable at full draw. And I'm able to stay a little more locked in to my anchor. So basically, when I struggle to see, or if it's dark, or if I'm nervous, or whatever, I don't feel like I move my head around as much, or I come out of that anchor point as much with that 36, because the anchor point is just cleaner and fits my face better, fits my draw length better. So absolutely. That's really why I went with it. If I was a longer draw, maybe 29, 30 inches, I'd probably be with the 40 because the speed would be there for me and the comfort would probably be there for me. But they both shoot great, but I like the 36.
There you go. All right, what do you got, Kathy?
Chuck Hensey.
When
shooting a thumb button release, how do you activate the release? Back tension or thumb pressure?
So he wants to know that when you're shooting a button, are you activating the shot using back tension, just wrapping your thumb around and doing back tension, or are you using your hand basically in any way to activate?
So when I shoot a button, I don't squeeze with my thumb at all. I pretty much shoot it all with back tension. And it's really hard to kind of explain it, but I shoot it more like a transfer of energy more than back tension. So when I'm at full draw, and let's say I'm just holding 24 pounds for that full draw, okay? When I start pulling, I'm not like starting to pull and pulling, 24 pounds and 25 and 26 as I'm trying to pull. I'm staying really similar to 24, 24.1, 24.11. I'm just constantly just super slowly pulling, but more so than with that same motion of pulling, I'm relaxing my forearms, I'm relaxing my index fingers and my fingers that I'm holding that release. I'm actually allowing that release to kind of move forward in my hand or, relax forward into my thumb. And I'm just pulling just enough to pick up the slack of whatever I'm relaxing forward. I'm pulling just enough so that the bow doesn't creep, so the cams don't creep forward. So I'm really sitting really static as far as poundage against the back wall. But it's just a combination of relaxing all the right muscles, tightening all the other muscles, and trying to just stay really calm.
Nice. Now, along that vein, let me expand on that for a couple questions here. Let's talk about under tension, because you have established yourself not as only one of the best shooters ever, but under pressure, you are able to hit those 14s. Under pressure, you're able to, perform when it matters a lot. And I know similar to Levi, you probably remember, right? Similar to Levi, you probably remember every single one you didn't, but you have established yourself as someone who performs great under pressure. So when you are shooting for that 14 for the win or whatever it may be, do you intentionally or mindfully make any adjustment changes to that tension, or are you singularly focused on doing it the exact same every time?
I'm not, man, that's a really, really loaded question with a whole lot of parts to it.
We got time.
All right. So for me, like, there's a difference between how I practice and how I compete. And I would say the biggest difference is, to answer this question, is I pay attention when I'm practicing to every teeny little intricate detail. Okay, so like I'm really hyper focused on my form, my execution, my breathing, all of the different stuff. I'll pay attention to it in practice. But when I get to a tournament and when I'm competing in that tournament, all the way down to the very last arrow, I don't really put any extra emphasis on that arrow, and I don't even think about it. I just get up there and do it, and I try to let all of my practice, everything I've done, carry me through that moment without actually having to consciously break it down and think about it. Because when I do that, then I don't have enough mental capacity to really focus on the task at hand, which is just, picking an aim and spot, absorbing everything that's going on and how fast that stuff changes in the dynamics of a shoot down and all the scores. So I try to focus on the scores, focus on my strategy, but really not put any extra emphasis on my shot routine or paying any extra attention to how I'm holding the release or tension on the bow handle or any of that stuff. I just subconsciously just do it. And because I feel like the second you let that stuff get into your brain where you're like, don't screw up, you screw up.
Right.
Don't bobble low.
Right.
You better aim high. Yeah.
Right.
So I try to not think about that stuff. I just try to think of, okay, what do I need to do here? Where's my aiming spot? Which ring do I need to hit? And that's what I try to do. And if I miss it, well, then I got all the time in the world to figure out what I need to do next, or if that's that's it, and it's over.
Right. So once you make, like you said, you just basically make a decision, and you've put in all that work before. So when you're in that moment, whether it's course management on a 3D course, whether it's having to shoot for a 14 or whatever, an upper, whatever it may be through the context of that 3D event. I say 3D event, people, because indoors or Reading, Danny just has to shoot the middle. So there's really no course management when it comes to just shooting the middle. What is your threshold for what I guess you would consider outside thoughts? Like you say, I'm going to do this, and you just do it. But during your shot, what is your threshold for basically at what point do you let down because you thought of the wrong thing, or some sort of outside influence got into your head?
I wish I was like disciplined enough to have a go no go all the time. Sometimes it's just a matter of how everything's feeling. If I had a breakdown, like an actual breakdown, then I'll probably let down. If it's something that some loud noise or something comes into the background that caught my attention for a second, but I was able to like refocus and get right back in the shot, I don't feel like it really affected me that bad, I might stick with it.
Gotcha.
So I don't necessarily have a parameter that is like, hey, if this happens, let down. If this thought creeps in your head, don't let down. Because I'm not immune, even though that's kind of what I'm saying. How I practice, how I compete. That's my intentions of what I'm trying to practice. How I'm trying to compete.
Right.
So I'm not immune to having bad thoughts creep into my head, or I'm not immune to thinking about something I shouldn't be thinking about. And those thoughts are 100% going to come into play, and it's okay. Like those things, you don't always have to suppress them. And in fact, like I try to not waste my time trying to suppress them, like because then I'm not focusing on what I need to do. So like if they come into my head, they come into my head, and then I move on. I don't like shame myself for that. It's like bad Dan, you shouldn't be thinking about that. Move forward, like think, get that out of your head. So I just move on and keep, if a bad thought comes in, it's there, deal with it, move on. That's what I do.
There you go. All right.
That's what I try to do.
Right. Robert.
What scope size and power do you use for 3D, clarifier or not?
What scope size and power lens do you shoot for 3D, and clarifier or no clarifier?
All right, scope size is a 31 millimeter Excel, 6 power. I use the Feather Vision Perfectium 6, which is what would that be, a 0.75, I think, diopter, Greg?
Okay. Yep.
Isn't it?
I believe so.
Yeah. So. Yeah. And then 0.75 diopter, and then a B clarifier in a Hamsky. Is what I run on that.
And then what sort of so people don't have to ask, what sort of an aiming reference dot are you using in that scope?
So I use a 19th thou up pin. Is what I use. Mother of pearl. Yeah, I shoot all different colors, and I'm wake up not knowing what I'm going to do that day. Sometimes like white face, white bag, bright day, I'm probably going to shoot red on that. I feel like red contrasts really good. If I'm shooting a dot or shooting a 5 spot, I don't necessarily need a super sharp pan, just because it's, I'm aiming in the middle of a big giant white circle. So It could be a little hazy, be a little blurry. If I'm shooting with a group of guys, and somebody that I'm following a lot is shooting green veins or green knocks and stuff, then I'll probably shoot blue on that day, just because I want my pen to contrast really well with his veins. And if I'm going to be aiming off of those arrows or aiming on those arrows, I don't want my green pen to be blended in with his green veins and his green knock, and me not be able to tell the difference of which one's my pen and which one's his veins. And then if I'm shooting with somebody that's maybe, shooting some other color, or it's dark or something, or maybe it's bright or whatever, and I want to be shooting green, I might switch to a green pen. And shoot that a little bit and shoot it dim. So I don't have a set color, but that's I have a reason for what I shoot. And I mean, a lot of times, like I'll shoot, just like I said, I'll maybe shoot green for most of the tournament. When I come up on a white target that washes my pin out, I'm going to switch over to green, or I'll switch over to red or something. I can see a little
from target to target.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
How? Yeah, you're going to need to explain that. So explain how you are literally switching pin colors from target to target.
Shooting a Zebros light. So it's just I use a blue fiber and switch the color.
Ah, I got you. So you're not changing. So you're changing the light color, not the fiber color itself.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I did not know that. I was literally about ready to say I've never.
No, it's so much faster than being like, time out. Break down. Let me spend 30 minutes to fix a fiber. Yeah.
Well, that's what I was wondering. I'm like, are you like carrying an extra housing and you just unscrew that housing and slap on another, or what? Okay, I get it. So you're shooting a 19 thousandths fiber, but with your Zebros light kit, you can make it whatever color you want.
Yes.
Ah, that's all right. That's not the dumbest idea I've ever heard. Now, do you shoot that same rig for everything? Reading, Dakota Classic, Vegas, Indoor Nationals, 3D, the whole 9 yards?
Sometimes. For the most part, yeah. If I do switch, sometimes I shoot dots, like sticker dots on my lens for dots, for indoor or for reading. I've shot a black dot in reading quite a bit. The only problem that I find with like a black dot is it contrasts really well on a circle, so it centers up really well. Excuse me, but I lose it. Like a black dot, I'll lose a lot on a black target. So if it's really windy and I have to aim like 7 inches or 6 inches left, sometimes on those black targets, I can't see my dot, and it's really like you really have to look for it to try to pick it out, or you got to get somebody to like hold a light or shine something that'll kind of haze on the outer edge of your sticker or something like that to allow you to see it. It's just really frustrating. So the last couple of years I've shot a fiber in reading and actually preferred it.
Gotcha. And Z Brothers website probably just crashed. All right, babe, what do you got?
Darren Graham.
Darren Graham.
What arrows do you use? Arrows and fletchings do you use indoors versus outdoors?
All right. He wants to know what arrows and fletching variations you run from indoors to outdoors. Was it outdoor 3D or outdoor? So basically indoors and then outdoor 3D.
Okay, so indoors, this year I shot the AAE hybrid 4-inch is what I shot, and like that thing a lot on my 27s. Outdoor 3D, I shot Flex Fletch Silent Night 2-inch, and then for like my small arrows, since I haven't competed with them this year, last year I shot the hybrid 2.0. And yeah.
Nice. So now, how much helical or offset are you running on those from indoors to 3D?
About like that much. I don't measure.
Whatever the jig is set to out of the box.
Yeah, I don't measure that stuff. I mean, I don't put a lot of helical on my stuff because I don't want vein contact on my blade. Or as little as possible. So, the bigger arrow that I shoot, maybe have a little bit more helical. The smaller arrow I shoot, a little less.
Right. All right. So let's talk about something. I actually get a lot of questions about this, and the answer's pretty simple for me anyway, and that is how far from the back of the arrow are you putting your vanes, and obviously why.
I don't have a measurement on that. That depends on the knock that I shoot and the bushing that I shoot and the arrow that I'm shooting. Some of them have different length bushings. But that being said, it's all based on getting the vein off my chin. So if I'm gonna shoot, if I'm shooting a very little fletching or like a micro diameter arrow and I'm shooting a low profile vein, that vein might not stick out that far. And on top of that teeny tiny little arrow. So it allows me to bring it back a little bit, and it won't touch my chin. Otherwise, a bigger arrow that sticks out might touch my chin, so I have to move it forward a little bit. But I just want to get the arrow off my face, not have any contact, not have any vein contact on my chin.
100%, 100%. David Williams says, do you prefer a lighter or heavier arrow for 3D? So basically, light with a max speed or heavy with sacrificing some speed?
I'm going to shoot whatever the speed is, period. So, right. if I'm shooting like this last tournament that I was shooting, 410 grain arrow, and I got to shoot 78.5 pounds to get the speed out of it, that's what I'm going to do. If I'm shooting a 300 grain arrow and I only have to shoot 60 pounds, then that's what I would do. Obviously, to me, I would rather shoot a heavy arrow than a light arrow, so long as because you're going to gain a little bit of a benefit there, maybe for glance outs or, wind drift, stuff like that. Outlying factors might influence that arrow's accuracy. But that only goes as far to say that I can handle it physically. So if you got to shoot 78 pounds in order to get the speed out of your arrow, but you can't hold that steady, or you can't draw it and 20 times or 60 times in an indoor round or whatever, then you don't need to be shooting. You need to reduce that weight and reduce that arrow length. So just find a poundage that you can comfortably shoot, that you can shoot and execute shots really well through the whole round without being tired, and base your arrow build off of that. And I think you'll be better, choosing what you shoot the most accurately, and then building your arrow around that, rather than being like, I'm a kinetic energy nut. And this applies to hunting, whatever, whether I'm, trying to blow through a tree and then go through that animal and then bury into the ground, or whether you're just trying to make as accurate of a shot as possible.
Right.
And
all right.
shoot
So
light and fast.
Right. So I'm going to probably butcher this guy's name pretty hard. Nathan Brooks. Nathan Brooks.
I know her.
My bad.
I know her.
My bad. She wanted to know, if the moon was made of spare ribs, would you eat it?
Cooked?
He did not specify, so I'm going to go with cooked, just for the safety of Ebola.
Yeah, because I think there's a lot of worms and trichinosis and different stuff. I think.
Trichinosis? I think that's bears, but they could be bear ribs. He didn't say. Maybe he spelled spare and it meant bear. But anyway, all right. So all right. The name I'm actually going to butcher here is Fraggerrock. TMIV. I'm not, bro. However bad I screwed up your name, my apologies in advance. Says, if you change from indoor to 3D arrows, do you redo your knock tie-ins, D-loop, and rest for new center as arrow's diameter changes, or just the rest height and ignore the loop? Basically, do you change the loop and your whole configuration there when you go to a new rig?
Assuming that everything stayed the same as far as poundage goes, tune, all of it, then knock, I wouldn't change much. But if I'm changing arrow size, I'm probably going to have to change my tune a little bit, change my rest height. If I stay with the same exact knock on that bow, then I would probably just leave everything right where it was, because generally my loops are set in a very particular spot.
Right.
Hang on just a second.
Dan's getting a delivery.
So
Dan had to adjust the security settings on the Casa. All right. So Nick Harp, do you shoot 80% or 70% V mods?
70 V.
Okay, 70 Vs. Let's see here. Mother of pearl. Lonnie Gray, if your draw length is between mods, is it better to get the shorter and make long, or longer and make short?
It depends on the poundage that you plan on shooting. Like I would say, so let's say you've got a 60 to 70 pound bow, and we're trying to shoot, trying to hit 29 1/4. okay, somewhere right in that half. But you're only going to shoot maybe 65 pounds. Then, you know, maybe when you back that model out, or you take 2 twists or something out of your limbs, that's going to lengthen your draw length a little bit. So you probably wouldn't want to go with a 29 and a half, because it's going to lengthen you even further, and then you're going to have to shorten even further to get down to it. So if I was going to go in that route, I would probably go with the shorter limbs, take, you know, a couple twists out of my my cables, and a couple, you know, take the poundage out. And then again, if I was planning on shooting a bow that's like 50 to 60, but I wanted to shoot it at 60 pounds, and I'm 29 and a quarter inch draw length, if I went with a 29 and a half and I tried to actually shorten or untwist the cables to get down to 29 and a quarter, but I went with 29 and a half, I wouldn't be able to get to 60 pounds anymore with a 50 to 60 pound bow, because the bow would max out at probably 57, 56. So if that's the case, again, you know, going with the shorter one. But there's, you know, just take that into consideration. Take into consideration where your draw length is. Take into consideration what the poundage you plan on using that bow for, and then order the bow's poundage and order the bow's module accordingly.
Right. Do you have a certain ratio of twists that you're willing to take out or put into either the strings or the cables? Obviously, you have to maintain some twists in them, but some folks are a little bit more anal about how many twists they do or don't have in their strings and cables. Is that something that you tend to pay attention to, or have you never really had to get outside of what would be acceptable?
You know, I'm really more concerned with my draw length being right. So
okay,
I don't care if I had to tie a knot in my string in order to shorten it up. I would much rather be my draw length than worry about how many twists I put in it.
That's fair enough, and I actually believe that. Gary, Rhonda, Rex.
Hold on. Don't tie knots in your strings.
Do not tie knots in your strings. That was hyperbole, everybody.
Yeah, I did that. I had to do that once. So I was hunting one time, and I actually ended up messing up a string. And I went to a local place to try to get a replacement. They didn't have anything close that would work, so I ended up grabbing the string that was the closest to it. And I had to tie like 3 or 4 knots in the thing in order to get the draw length to be in order for the string length to be similar. And I used it, and it got me through that hunting season. But that's not a good. Use it in a last resort, and that is at your own safety. Yeah.
Right. That is the most ghetto speed knocks I've ever heard in my life. Yeah. All right. So, Gary, Rhonda, Rex, do you set your thumb release heavy or light?
So I set my thumb pretty light, but not like to the point where I'm ever afraid of setting my thumb on it. So it won't go off. I can actually kind of set my thumb on it and move it around. It's not going to fire. I don't ever want to be afraid of setting my thumb on it. But it's not super heavy to where I actually have to dig into it at all with my thumb either.
Gotcha. Cole Payne, what is your tuning sequence?
So I guess I would say I set up a bow, and the first thing I kind of pay attention to is how it aims. So step 1, I build a bow. Then I'm going to kind of play around with the loop. I'm going to move my loop up and down a little bit on the string maybe just to see. And all I'm really paying attention to is how well it's aiming. I don't really care how well it's shooting, just pretty much just aiming. Once I get the bow to aim really well, then that's where I'm going to leave my loop. From there, I go up to paper tuning, and I paper tune the bow. First thing I'll do is I'll set it up so I'm tear and knock high. From there, I fix my left and right tear so that I'm not getting anything left or right. And then once I get the left and right straight up and down, then I slowly bring my rest up until I've gotten rid of the high tail high tear. And I generally will leave my stuff just a little bit tail high.
Nice. And so explain to everybody, you've referenced it a couple times, but explain to folks when you say that my loop is in a certain spot. So when you generally don't ever move the loop, most of us don't, but explain to folks why you say that your loop is in a certain spot and you generally never move it.
it's just how the bow's aiming. I feel like moving that, if I move that loop a 1/4 inch up and down the string, sometimes it'll cause a little bit more movement or a little less movement. So I just go, little incremental changes up and down the string until I figure out what I feel like I'm shooting the best or aiming the best, and go from there. Once I get it set, I just leave it, and then I'll move my rest blade up and down, and I'll set my center shot, and then I'll tune with my top hats or my left and right, and then I'll move my rest up to get rid of my tail high or tail low.
Now, do you ever like? I generally will measure axle to axle, and then I'll start with my loop maybe 1/8 of an inch above center. Do you have, what's your preferred starting? I mean, you've been doing this a long time as well, so it's not like you just throw it on there and move it 1 inch at a time. Where do you generally set your loop to start?
Yeah, it's very similar to yours.
Well, then why don't I ever win?
That's a really valid question, Greg. Maybe some inward looking.
Hey. Yeah, well, that's true. It's absolutely true. All right.
I mean, you got your loop in the right spot. What else do you need?
I'm telling you.
Really.
Right? All right, Kathy, what do you got? Christopher Brown.
What is your current 3D arrow setup? Diameter, point weight, vanes, and length.
All right, Christopher Brown wants to know your current 3D arrow setup, literally the whole build of the arrow, point weight, vanes, the whole 9 yards. We'll start with the ASA arrow and then the IBO arrow after that.
I think we pretty much already went there. ASA and IBO is the same for me. I don't switch anything, so I'm shooting. You know what? I'll go over last year's, because last year I shot the same arrow all season. I shot a PS23, 120 grain point, Flex Fletch SK200. And this year I'm shooting, last tournament I shot a PS27, 100 grain point, SK200 Flex Fletch vane.
Nice. And how long are those carbon to carbon?
The PS27s, I believe, are 27 and a half, I want to say, and the 27 and a quarter, and PS23s were 26 and 3/8, I think.
Gotcha. All right, Kathy, what do you got?
The PS27s, though, are Joseph Goza's arrows. So.
The people that you have or still look up to.
All right. Somebody asked, a lot of people look up to you, Dan. No, that's not a short joke, so you can turn it into whatever you like. But a lot of people look up to you, Dan. Who are some of the people?
That would be a tall joke,
right?
Actually.
Well, hey, you got to flip the script a little bit. But
yeah.
Who are some of the who are some of the people that you have and still look up to in the sport?
A lot of them. Man, I've been doing this stuff for a long time. I would say, some of the people I've looked up to, Randy Kitts by far, owner of Black Eagle and Conquest, Greg Summers, Brandon Reyes, Ben Summers, those guys, great people. Outside of just shooters, definitely did learn a lot of how people conduct business and how they help, always willing to help people, help the sport. And then, from competitor standpoint, definitely Jesse's always been, an icon, role model, just a good person, great person. I always enjoy watching him shoot, watching him win. Man, even people like James Lutz, seeing him come on last year, win some big tournaments. I admire watching him do what he's been doing and coming onto the scene strong and just being a really good competitor and doing, putting on a show, doing what he's been working really hard for.
Absolutely.
And Levi, I always admire watching Levi do what he does and what he's done over the years. It's just, I don't think you could be a competitor against somebody like that and not truly admire, what he's accomplished and how he's done it. And it's just really, I'm really thankful to to be there. And even though I've spent most of my time getting my butt kicked by him, it's really neat. I'm really glad I compete at the time period that I'm competing in to really truly be able to experience and acknowledge, what I feel like he's done in the sport, because I've been trying to beat him the whole time, along the way, and it's just, it's pretty neat.
Absolutely. Now, I asked Levi Morgan this question, I don't know when. I don't know. It was on a podcast or an interview. I don't know. I don't remember. Anyway, I'm going to ask you the same question. 3D specific. If you could build your top bail on the last day of a 3D event, historically, alive, dead, from the way back to when to right now, who are the other shooters that you would want to be shooting with on the final day of that event? Whether they're still shooting or not, this is like the old Abe Lincoln questions. Literally, your top competitive group, whether it's someone who's the best archer or someone who's the most fun, how would your dream group be on the final day of a 3D event?
And it's a peer group?
Yep.
So this is for the win?
Yeah, this is the last day. This is your, and I will remind you that you were on Levi's list, by the way, but go ahead.
I would say me and maybe three other guys that didn't shoot bow really well. That would have a good chance of winning.
Or the win.
I mean, if I got to pick three other guys to be shooting against, I'd just assume, run away with it.
Right.
But no, seriously, I guess if I was to pick most competitive guys I think, Randy Ulmer, Randy Chappell, those guys that did shot a long time ago. I never got the pleasure to actually compete against them. So no disrespect to anything, any of those guys, but totally basing it off of the competitors that I've shot against my whole career. I would say Levi, Jeff Hopkins, Jack Wallace, and probably, man, I don't know, that Joseph Goza, Paul Thompson was one of those guys. That
nice.
Paul was awesome.
Nice. That's awesome. And as much as me personally, Dan, I wish that archers had more of a desire for archery history, but we are where we are. But I always enjoy talking to guys like you and Levi and Jeff Hopkins and asking those kinds of questions, because you do hear obviously you and Levi both said Randy Ulmer. Most people today, the only glimpse they got of Randy was here about 3 years ago when he tried to make a quick little comeback, but he didn't necessarily stick around all that long. But talk about a great guy who he absolutely was amazing in his day. So, I think it's great that guys like you and Levi, et cetera, literally are aware and cognizant of the fact that there were some guys historically that have shot that game at an absolutely amazing level and kind of blazed the trail for you guys to do what you're doing today.
Well, yeah, above and beyond just blazing the trail. Like Randy in particular, unbelievably intelligent. And Randy, was one of those guys that shot a hinge, kind of before a lot of people were successful with that hinge, and had, started doing his thing and winning a bunch of tournaments. Jeff's kind of done, had a huge winning streak there for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
And, did his own trailblazing and also did his own, I think he just, guys like that come onto the scene, Levi as well, they just, all those guys kind of raise the bar in their own little way and have helped, whether you're getting beat by them or not, you got to raise your game if you're going to compete against them. So, you can either look at some people like that as a negative influence and kind of consider yourself a victim, like poor me, if I didn't have to compete against Michael Jordan, maybe Scottie Pippen would have won a bunch of MVPs, but
right.
In reality, Scottie got six rings because he had him on his team, and same same goes for me. You know, if I didn't have somebody like that to compete against, you know, I might be doing something else. I might be making squirrel saddles, or, you know, starting doing something like that. Totally different business.
That's right. All right, babe, what do you got?
Josh Harp.
Josh Harp.
I'm working on setting up a home shop, and I'm wondering what shop equipment you use to change, adjust, and tune your bow.
So he is setting up a home shop. He's going to be setting up a little shop at home to do all of his repairs and tuning and whatnot. What are his must-have items in your opinion to get started?
All right, so must-have for a home shop, I would say good bow press. You know, I use the Power Press by Last Chance. I love their presses. I think you need an arrow saw. I'm not really. I mean, there's a lot of good arrow saws, so get one. I think Last Chance came out. I don't want to, you know, just be plugging one person's stuff, for instance, but you know, Last Chance came out with a really nice saw. Probably bow press and saw is probably the number one and number two things you need. I would recommend getting, obvious tools, Allen wrenches, etc.
Right.
But
Draw
I would
board.
say another, draw board's good. I use just a metal aluminum yardstick that I kind of have a little notch in the end of it that I use to stick up against my string and pull down when I'm like out on my 3D range, even where I don't have a draw board. So, you know, just to check stuff. And I think another piece of equipment that I've found that's super useful for me, doesn't necessarily apply particularly to into your own shop, but it's the Cinum. Is it Cinum press? Is that pronounced right, Greg?
Cinum?
Yeah, or whatever that portable press. Yeah, it's like SYN something or other. Yeah, SYNUM or something like that, I think is what is that portable press. You can get them for I think they're around $100, but I use that thing all the time when I'm out at my range, or I'm out in Vegas or anything. If I need anything to put, you know, make a little adjustment to my bow and the press is available, those things are awesome. I take them on every hunting trip with me. Great little presses.
Yeah, one of the things that I have found to be, and I'm sure you have some form of it, Dan, and I'm using the OMP bow vise. Having a good bow vise is priceless in my opinion. I mean, it's a fantastic way to just hold things in place, and yeah, I love the OMP vise, but no, I mean, absolutely, like Dan mentioned, you know, as far as tools go, you know, of course, you're going to have the Allen wrench sets. Nowadays, lots of people are going to the Torx. I had one set of Torx for the longest time, and every time I needed it, it was at home or at the office, and I was at the other place. So I actually just bought two and just left one in each. But, yeah, that's absolutely good stuff. What do you got, Kathy? Gary Tor.
Do you ever deal with target panic, and if so, what do you do?
Target panic. He wants to know if you've ever fought off target panic, and if you still deal with target panic, and if so, what would you recommend to get through it?
So I dealt with target panic a long time ago, like when I was 17, probably. I wouldn't say I personally have dealt with it myself, as far as like where you know, we're talking about like you get to the point of you should admit yourself for help.
Right.
You know, it's like that's what I consider target panic. But I deal with it a lot online from a question, you know, Q&A, private message all the time. People ask me. So I guess, you know, this is kind of might be a little long, but so what I do personally, kind of start the year out, that helps keep me away from target panic, or if I ever feel what I call, you know, anxiety, which is really all target panic is. It's like to me, it's like the fear of missing. Okay. What I often do is I start out with a black target, the black circle. Start out around 6 inches. And this is what I recommend people to do. Start out with a 6-inch black circle. You can use like just paint cardboard and cut them out. All right. And you don't want to be aiming at the middle of this thing. You just want to be aiming in it. And I can't emphasize that enough. Do not try to aim at the middle as long as your pin's in it and floating. Just work on execution, work on your shot, work on your form, work on all that stuff. And generally, I recommend lowering your poundage down. Get it down, way down below normal. So if you can drop it 10 pounds, drop it 10 pounds. That way strength is not an issue. You're not worrying about fatigue. Your shots, your form's not breaking down. And guys usually have an ego issue, so they're hard to get them to drop their poundage down. But if you really, truly want to fix your target panic, drop your poundage down, shoot at a 6-inch circle. Okay, now let your pin float in that. Just work on form. Do that for like a couple weeks, and then cut a 1/2 inch off of that thing in radius. So now you're down to a 5-inch circle. Shoot at that for 2 weeks. Cut a little bit off. Shrink it down. Shoot at a 4-inch circle. Shoot at a 3-inch circle. And do this. It's going to take you 2 months. There are no quick fixes to target panic, because it's a way you literally have to train your brain in order to visually be okay with your pin floating in a bullseye. Whereas most people get panic, just like you hear of, big buck panic or whatever, where they see a deer and they think the second they get even just a sliver through some branches, I got to kill it now. I got to take a shot while I got a chance. And so they punch it or they speed things up. And what you want to do is you want to train your brain to just be okay with your pin floating around in the bullseye. And as you shrink that down, continue to just let your pin float around while you execute a shot. And the reason I'm saying, don't aim at the center is because then you're going to start aiming too fine. And when you start to be able to recognize holes or see holes, which is why I'm telling you to shoot at something black so that you don't see your arrow holes in it as well. When you start to get a little cluster of arrow holes that you can see, rechange your target, change to a brand new one. And just do this over time. What that does is 2 things. It's going to train your brain and train your psyche to be okay with watching your pin float in the bullseye, all the way down to when you get down to a 1-inch circle or smaller. And the other side is it's gonna build your physical strength up over that 2 months. So basically, when I kind of start my season out, that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm working my way through that, and it's kind of building up my physical strength and my shot routine, and at the same time, I'm just working on watching my pin float in the bullseye and make it. And it's effortless in the beginning when I'm haven't been shooting for a little bit of the season, and then by the time I'm down to a really small circle, I'm ready to transition right into a target and start shooting scores. And I can't stress enough, really, if you truly have target panic and you want to fix it, probably don't go to tournaments to do it or through the process.
Right.
And the reason I can't stress that enough is, I guess, using like a hurricane in a house as a metaphor. Okay, if you build a house and a hurricane comes by, which is what a tournament is, you take your practice, and your practice basically is like, building your shot process and your routine, and you're doing well in practice, not under a lot of pressure. And then you go to a tournament, and that tournament's like a hurricane, man. It just, some people don't punch their trigger when they're at home, and then they go to a tournament, they just pound their trigger and they're punching it and they're breaking low and they're freezing up underneath it. And that's because that tests every bit of your anxiety. And so if you go to a tournament halfway through, when you're halfway through kind of curing your problem, then that just wreaks havoc on your shot process, and it tears it all apart. And then you have to spend all this time trying to fix it again and trying to rebuild it and make it stronger before you go to the next tournament 2 weeks later, and it tears it all apart again. So stay away from tournaments for just a little while, a month or two, until you fix it, until you can 100% get through a day of practice without it. And then go to a tournament and have the expectations to, I don't want to tell you have expectations to lose, but set your goals that are realistic, and make those goals be, I want to shoot all my shots today and not punch my trigger.
Right.
And my God, don't punch your trigger. Just don't do it. I mean, be okay with drawing back, shaking, and pulling so hard for so long that you're shaking so bad that you miss. And just don't punch it. And as long as you get that between your ears, and that's your goal, you'll probably never punch it again. And eventually you'll start getting better. But a lot of people take short-term results over long-term consistent success or consistency. And, they punch their trigger once and they hit a bullseye. And then as long as that's always there as an option, you're probably always going to do it, when it's windy or when you get nervous or anything. You're always going to resort down to that.
Right. Absolutely. All right, what do you got?
Jeff Mason.
Jeff Mason.
What have you found to be the best D-loop location on the 36?
Jeff Mason wants to know, on the 36, what have you found to be, for you, the best D-loop location?
I can't say off the top of my head. I think I'm really, really, really close to right in the center of my burger button hole.
Okay.
So I'm pretty much dead center.
Now, do you do any of your tuning or any of your setup based upon the burger hole location, or is that just reference only?
That's just a reference to everybody can reference it on that bow.
Yeah, no, I agree. I get questions all the time about, my bow tuned great, but I was a little bit high in the burger hole. What do I do? And I'm like, shoot, the burger hole doesn't really have any tuning reference per se anymore, especially not with the cams and stuff we got now. What do you got, babe?
No, and it's different for everybody. It's like
right.
I stress that, can't stress that enough. What the loop location for me is where it fits for me. Like, Don't set your loop just because I do that. Just take some time. People need to take time and go out and actually play with stuff. Move it up, move it down, and learn and figure out how to do that. Like, instead of just like, well, he said that he does it like this, so that's what I'm going to do it like for a whole year or for however long you have that bow. And you really might shoot better if it was a 1/16 of an inch lower than where I put it. And so take some time. If you're going to spend the money on these bows, take some time to shoot them. Like, people need to shoot them and like play with them a little bit. You'll be surprised, because what works for Jesse, for instance, we're shooting the same bow, and I don't think we could be any more different. Our stabilizer weights are like 1.5 pounds different, probably. Right. Our lengths are even completely different. Our rest heights are different. Our burger button, where our arrow goes through a burger button, is probably different. Loop lengths are different. Peep heights are different. Jesse is extremely successful, shoots very, very well. But if I used what he does, it wouldn't work for me. Right. And if he used what I shot, he probably wouldn't. It wouldn't work for him.
Right. 2 more questions, then we're going to let Dan go. All right. One more. What's the last?
Austin Weber, do you
Austin Weber.
That the TRX 36 is really crucial to proper spine?
Do you find that the TRX 36 is more spine arrow sensitive?
No. I mean, I don't think as a general thing I could say that. It's I'm shooting the same spine that I shot last year out of my other bows. Same arrow, shot the same arrow out of it. It's just I have to tune move my top hats in order to tune it. But I feel like it shoots very accurately with a couple different spines. So I don't think it's really spine sensitive at all. I just have to retune it depending on which spine I'm shooting.
Right. All right. Last question.
Brian Krogman.
Brian Krogman.
Do you ever do any creep tuning on a TRX?
Do you ever do any creep tuning?
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say. I hate some of these names like creep tuning. Just because, like, I'm not gonna if I feel myself come off the wall, I'm gonna let down. I'm gonna draw back again. I'm gonna start my shot over. I'm not gonna be like, well, I've tuned my bow to still hit the dot, so I'm just gonna shoot it. Right. Some people do. I won't do that. And so I guess my style of what I would call creep tuning is I hold really, really I'm talking about like barely against the wall, and I'll fire shots, and then other shots I'll pull as hard as I can and fire shots. And and if I hit high or low, then I might adjust my timing a little bit to see, if I can get those 2 shots, those 2 opposite ends of the spectrum shots in order to hit, pretty close to each other.
Absolutely. All right. Well, hey, Dan, I really appreciate you spending some time with us today. I know right now is a pretty tenuous time, and you're out there doing the thing, but we really appreciate it. Let everybody out there know where they can keep up with Dan and his adventures on the World Wide Web.
Well, until they ever let us out of our house, you can find me at my house. Hashtag COVID 19 right now. Otherwise, Facebook, Dan McCarthy, and Twitter. I don't use that often anymore, but Instagram at Dan McCarthy.
There you go. All right, everybody. That's Dan McCarthy. He's one of the good guys out there. Easily one of the most successful archers on tour, and an absolute bottomless pit of knowledge. He is incredibly smart, intuitive, and as you can tell from questions like this, Dan doesn't do things that generally haven't yielded him results. He does change some stuff, as you saw from his mass weight, stabilizer weights, but it's always about function. It's always about what works for him. It's always about what's going to allow him to be successful, and if it changes the next year, he just rolls with it. So, that is certainly Dan's recipe for success, but that's going to be the live feed Q&A with Danny McCarthy today, everybody. We appreciate you tuning in. We're going to keep rolling these things out. Obviously, since we started doing these, they've been incredibly successful. If you guys have any more questions, or if you'd like me to do these with any particular person, shoot me a message, let me know. As always, head over and follow Dan McCarthy on his Instagram, on his Facebooks. His wife, Emily McCarthy, of course. Go follow her on both platforms as well. That's going to be it for today, everybody. You guys know the drill. As always, we want to hear from you, not about you. And as always, love, peace, and chicken grease. See you, everybody.